Hey everybody, my name is Derek and I'm the owner, creator, and head silicone slinger here at Almavidi, where we make silicone toys for adults. All right, tonight I have Reed from NerdOn Novelties, and we're going to be talking about, we had the kaiju that was in Shop Dad's design challenge, which was awesome. I think that was the one that broke the rubric. If I remember right, that was the quadruple threat. And so I really want to talk about that one. And then I think there was a second entry. I think it was like a carnivorous plant kind of thing. So yeah, we're going to have to talk about those two. Now, before we get there, I want to mention a couple of things. One, we've got new patrons. We had Cryptid, and we had, I think it was Kai. Those are two new patrons. So I wanted to do a shout out to both of them. Now, I'll remind everybody, we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/Amavidi, AMAVIDI. There is a tier. It's the Academy level. And at that level, you get access to the course that I'm working on. Now, that course is not complete yet, but patrons are getting early access to it. I haven't figured out what the price is going to be when it gets released, but it's not going to be cheap. I'll put it that way. There's already like 60 something videos in it. So, it's big. It's covering all the things, and it's maybe 2/3 of the way done. So, it's going to be big. Anyway, so yeah, there is a Patreon, patreon.com/Almavidi. And yeah, but if you come in at the Academy level, you will get access to the course now. Now, there are other levels, so you can support at whatever level feels comfortable for you. But I'll mention that because we had 2 new patrons this week. George is throwing links into the chat because George is awesome and she is manning the chat. And yeah, there's a link tree over there. I did see some wonderful folks in the chat. We have Safi Snow, and I saw Dub over there. And yeah, wonderful things happening. I can't remember if there was anything else I wanted to cover. Websites. They're in the link tree, but yeah, George is throwing them out there. We've got imakesextoys.com. If you want to learn how to do what we do, imakesextoys.com is a great place to get started. It's very bite-sized kind of stuff. You're probably watching on YouTube, and so you know about the 2-minute quickie videos that I do. Again, quickie stuff, easy, digestible. Yeah, there's some longer stuff out there as well, but they're easy, bite-sized things that you can kind of just dabble with a little bit. Then there's almavidi.com if you want to dive into more of our products and things like that. So yeah. All right. With that, I am going to bring on Reed from NerdOn Novelties. And yeah, I think we'll have a nice conversation. I had the opportunity to talk to Reed this week, and we nerded out for like half an hour talking about very, very geeky things. And I'm going to love this. So hopefully you guys do too. And if I do this, we should have... There's Reed.
Hello.
Hi. You look very much like Shop Dad.
Yeah. He's kind of inspiration for this setup.
You look almost identical to Shop Dad.
I know.
Well, from this view, you do. Yeah. So how are things where you are?
Things are good. Very, very busy. We're enjoying some light rain, as I've been told. It's not heavy rain.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's been good.
Good. Now, you and I had a chance to talk this week, and you gave me kind of a quick background on how you came to be a dongsmith. Do you want to share a little bit of your background?
Yeah. So I started off doing makeup effects in Vancouver here. I went to school for it. and then worked very briefly in the film industry in special effects, and then moved on to props and set tech and all that fun stuff. And I had actually a family member of mine mention, hey, it'd be really cool. You have the skill set for this. You should make dongs. And I said, no, not really for me. And about 6 years later, I'm like, hey, you think that's something that could work? And here we are making dongs now.
Yeah. Now you said makeup, and I think you mentioned special effects. Now, do you want to kind of talk a little bit about kind of your special effects experience or kind of your makeup effects experience?
Yeah, I don't have a ton of like official things out there. I worked in a couple shops in Vancouver, a lot of stuff from sort of my own home setup here for like local theater productions. I think the most viewed thing that I have is an octopus for an airline commercial that was like, 6 years ago or somewhat. So yeah, I've had lots of shop experience that came out of that, and lots of mold making, and met some really incredible makers from the special effects industry through that. And they sort of are, a lot of the designs that I worked on with them are kind of like intermixed with sort of the style of stuff that we do here.
Okay. And so now my understanding, especially in the special effects industry, you're working with not just silicone, but also with latex. Am I in the right general area there?
That's correct. Okay. Yeah, and you work with a couple kinds of latex, like your generic like latex that can like stipple onto things and create like burns, that kind of stuff for like on set quick effects. And then you also have like, you can do latex masks, and then you have foam latex, which is something you have to bake. And if you're doing anything with silicone at all, you want to make sure that you're doing it very, very, very separately.
Yes.
To the point that like a lot of shops will actually have like two different rooms. Like there is a latex room and then there's a silicone room, and you do not mix them.
Yes. Actually, my silicone room is enclosed. Not that I ever have any tin silicone or latex, but my silicone room is enclosed. I have a separate room for my resin. All my resin is done in a separate room.
Smart.
And then I have a general kind of workspace, which is where my laser is. And, I have a few other pieces of equipment that I work with. But it's very segregated. You have your little workspaces, and platinum pure silicone is a little bit sensitive.
Yeah, it can be rather finicky, especially if you're doing it in like a smaller space where you don't have a lot of room to spread things out. I worked in a shop that had like a ton of room. It's like the whole back half of the shop was like silicone, and anything towards the front half was all like machining and all that fun stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's all very separate.
Wow. So somebody said you should be a dongsmith, and then at some point you said, well, maybe I could do that.
Yeah.
What got you thinking that you could?
What got me thinking that I could was a job that I had not in special effects. I was making prosthetic breast forms out of silicone at the time. And one of our office people came down and said, hey, we have somebody who's asking for a prosthetic penis. I'm like, oh, you mean a dildo? They're like, yeah, I suppose it could be a dildo. I'm like, well, I mean, I could do that. I have a home business that I kind of been playing around with the stuff with. And they're like, yeah, sure, put one together for us. And so over the next 2 weeks, I hand sculpted a very large, very thick, realistic dildo for them. And they're like, great, awesome. And that was the first sell that I made, was to my own work.
Wow.
Yeah.
What you said, it was very large, very realistic. Was that by request, or was that just a mistake? Okay, I wasn't sure if that was a mistake of scale or if that was as requested.
It was a little bit of both. Like when we had my first like product discussion meeting with them, and it was like around the lunch table. I'm like, yeah, so like, what are you guys looking for? Like, I don't know, like 8 inches and maybe 2 to 3 inches in width. I'm like, okay, yeah, I can probably make something like that happen. And I showed up with the first sculpt of it, and they're like, okay, we're going to need to dial it back just a titch.
Yeah.
And so that was a fun moment for me. I sculpt all that stuff away, and But
And
I
was that
haven't been able to sell them yet on like one of our like bubble beams here, but I'm
mm,
working on them.
yeah. And that first one, was that in clay, or you said you sculpted it? So that was hand
Yes,
sculpted.
yeah. So hand sculpted in at that point I was using monster clay. Actually, I don't know if you've used that
Uh,
before,
I have.
but it's awesome. I love it.
Hmm.
It doesn't leave too much residue on your hands. It's really easy to work with. And yeah, that's what I had been sculpting most of my toys out of at that point. I hadn't really started doing any of the 3D modeling.
Hmm.
But yeah, the hand sculpting is fun. I like to go do some more of that, but the 3D modeling is just it's so much more efficient. And you can just like control Z and undo something.
Yeah. Can't do that with monster clay so much. Um,
No, it doesn't like that.
No, but one of the things about monster clay is that, it's clay, but it's also a mixture with wax. So it has those
Yeah.
properties of both, which is really, really interesting to work with.
Yeah, it's really cool when you're going to like smooth things. You can actually like if you have a vat of it, you can actually like dip a sculpt in and
Hmm.
pull it out, and it will like smooth all of the everything but the largest of things that you've sculpted on it or textures. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Yeah,
Yeah.
would be like doing a wax dip with like a 3D printed piece.
Oh, now you got me thinking.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's kind of cool. I tried to do it with our gelatinous prick when that was our other hand sculpted, our other
oh,
hand sculpted piece that we did, and it didn't pan out the way I wanted to. I had to go in and sculpt each of the little drips
mm,
in myself, and then do that, and it worked great.
yeah. Uh, so you mentioned the breast forms that you were working on.
Hmm.
Do you want to talk about that business or that product or that range that you were working on?
Yeah. So the majority of what we were selling for was breast forms for people who are transitioning or drag queens, that kind of area. And it kind of expanded as I worked there into other
Hmm.
places. Like we had a couple film people come in looking for something, but I actually got to design a new type of breast form that kind of compiled a bunch of different breast form designs into one and created this really like lifelike, really movable and alive piece that people could wear. And
Oh, wow.
that's kind of where I cut my teeth 3D modeling was they let me loose on that for 18 months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that
Yeah.
included like a crazy mold rig that we had set up that had like, I think there was 16 or 18 individual pieces that had to get bolted together in different ways. And yeah, it was cool. It was a lot of fun. But
Mm.
they're all made out of like platinum pure silicone as well, so that sort of
Mhm.
is again right in the wheelhouse of what I do here at NerdOn.
Yeah. Dub Sativa has a question. I'm going to get to it in just a second. But I have the breast forms and the uh, those things have been on my mind. I've always wanted to kind of dive into that, but it is such an
Hmm.
interesting category, and trying to come up with something that is lifelike or something that is realistic or something that it is so difficult. It's such a uh, that would take so much research and work to get into. I just
Yeah,
oh
we had the opportunity to work with Smooth On and some of their chemists to like
oh wow.
get our own silicone designed from them
Mhm.
that fit our needs. And we actually discovered the silicone that made the whole lifelike portion of it work. We discovered by accident.
Mm.
We had mixed a cup of silicone and left it out overnight, and came back in the morning, and it was just like a garbage thing. Oh, I mismixed this. Toss it off to the side, and then you come in the morning to clean it up. And like we poked it, and a lot of times when you get like silicone that's on the softer side, it's a fairly dead. It's like you'll flick it, and there's no like bounce back to it. The softer you get.
Mm.
Um, and so this stuff, we flicked it, and it was like gel just went like forever. And we're like,
Oh
great.
wow.
We take that, we package it up, we send it off to Smooth, and we're like, we want this.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so they sent some representatives up, and we got to talk with them, and we got to show them like what we were doing and why we needed it to have these properties. And they're like, oh, this is okay. Yeah, now we know what you need.
Yeah. Um, No, there's those mistakes. Those mistakes are just so wonderful sometimes. Um, I've got several mistakes that ended up leading to various things. Um, yeah,
They're the best kinds because, like, at first you're like, "Oh man, great! It's you can't be mad at anybody but yourself." And then, yeah, the 2 days later, you're like, "Wait a minute, that
this
was
is
a solution,
interesting.
not a mistake."
Yeah. All right. So Deb Steve's question was, what are your techniques for smoothing monster clay?
Smoothing monster clay. A lot of the time, for the where did it go? For the original hand sculpted version of the gelatinous prick, I actually so I did the dip for it first of all, and then I took some more heat to it to get any like rough patches, and then I think it was it 99%, I think is what I used to go, and I just like hand smooth the whole thing. It took me forever to do. I've since I've tried acetone with it, and that like it didn't have as much of an effect. So I'd say if you're going to use anything, use the isopropyl.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it works fairly well. I'm a big fan of adding more texture. So, you use too much of a thinner of any kind and you're going to start taking it away really quickly, especially in like the softer monster clays. I use medium primarily here, but that's also just because that was what was available.
Yeah. I mean, the medium is pretty hard, pretty stiff. And because it's a mix of wax and clay, it's kind of odd because you can use alcohol, but also I think you can use mineral oil.
We used isopropyl myricate. I don't know if you've heard of that before.
No.
It's so in special effects and prosthetics, you can use isopropyl myricate as a like to help remove prosthetics because it's essentially an oily alcohol, is how it was described to me. And so it has properties of both, and so you can keep with the isopropyl myricate, you use the oil and as like sort of a lubricant, and then the alcohol portion of it actually helps and slowly dissolves things away. And that one worked fairly well. And I don't know, what did I sculpt that had that? I don't even know if that made it to production. I think it just looked cool and I put it to the side. But yeah, no, isopropyl myricate a fun one to use as well. I recommend trying it out. It worked fairly well with the monster clay.
I just had to Google that, and I'm going to throw it into the chat because I can. Because that would totally make sense.
Yeah, and it works just like the mineral oil would.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which we would also use in special effects for dissolving like foam latex pieces and pulling it off the skin without hurting the skin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah, that was one of those things that I kind of played with, especially like Sculpey. Sculpey was another one of those where you use kind of mineral oil, and so on the clay side you use mineral oils and things like that, and then I can't remember which way it was, but I always used I kept flipping back and forth between alcohol and oil with monster clay, and
it all depends on what you want, right? Because I find when you use the isopropyl, you end up with almost like a smearing. It doesn't really have any texture, but it looks funny. It's hard to see what's actually there. Yeah.
And let's see. Alex Grady was asking, interested to hear whether someone from the special effects sphere, where two-part molds and multi-part molds are common, if he still recommends glove molds for dongs.
Absolutely. The main reason that I recommend glove molds or jacket molds is just you don't have to worry about seam lines. The moment you introduce seam lines, that's another area where bacteria can get into and whatnot. Now, there's certainly technologies out there and ways that you can get around that. You can encapsulate the whole thing again after you poured it, that kind of idea. But for all of my stuff that I do here, it's all glove molds.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, kind of, with the exception of these things, which are our naughty nipples that we. This is the 3D printed mold for our naughty nipples. I was experimenting with how fast I could design a product and get it into a 3D printable form. And so I designed this, both parts, and had it on the printer on a lunch break at that the job that wanted me to build a dong for them.
Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, it's a hollow 3D printed mold. It's two parts, and because it isn't used to go inside of anybody and just
Yeah.
goes on onto people, it's totally fine to have a two-part mold for that. But yeah, in special effects, we definitely primarily use two-part or matrix molds as well,
Okay.
which is
And
a whole another universe on its own. And I love matrix molds. I think they're the coolest thing, and people who understand how they work are the best kind of people.
yeah.
Because they still confuse me sometimes.
Okay. So I just nerded out for a little bit there and lost my train of thought. So let's go back to the design challenge. And
yeah.
you had a couple of entries.
I did, yes. Yeah, we had two of them.
Which one do you want to talk about first?
So why don't we talk about the let's do the kaiju first. I guess that's the one that we've mentioned the most.
Okay.
And so I have a printed version of it here. It's a little bit different than the one that I sent in for the contest, namely in that this one is not an ovipositor.
Okay.
Yeah, so I printed this one off just to make sure that the sizing was going to be correct and I wasn't going to have any failures on the printer because of any weird hollow sections and whatnot. And it came out looking pretty good. I'm fairly happy with it. The ovipositor is going to end up being significantly larger than this, probably yay-ish, I would imagine, just so that there's room that you can squeeze an egg through it.
Right.
Yeah, but yeah, this is our first one that we had, and this is the one that kind of broke Shop Dad's rubric, and I'm really sorry, Shop Dad, that I didn't follow the rules.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just generously interpreted them. But yeah, this one's been sitting in sort of the back of my design file for a while, and when this came up, I'm like, oh, I have a flare design that I've always wanted to try making. And this sort of flowed together fairly nicely, and I was inspired by Pacific Rim, and so you got all this cool chitinous spiky fun stuff in here, and each of these is an individual plate as well, which is kind of cool. And so I'm hoping I'll be able to hand paint in these somehow, and then I want this to be a glowing blue or something like that, kind of very, very Pacific Rim is what I'm going for.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where are you in the process here? This is iteration number 2.
Yes, yeah. So this is sort of the dumbed down version. I usually print one of these just so I can have it in my hands, because I came from traditional sculpting, so everything looks really, really good on the computer, and then you print it out and you're like, okay, that's not what I remember seeing. So I usually use an initial print. You print it on the smaller side just so you can kind of get your hands on it and see what's actually happening with stuff. I don't know if you can see in here, but there's actually a bit of a space between the shaft and the inside of one of these plates, and that's because I didn't extend the shaft down far enough before I booleaned it. So there's actually a little tiny gap underneath that I have to go in and fix. But I wouldn't have seen that through the modeling, because in Blender, when you're looking at it, you don't see any of that in there.
Gotcha.
Which is why I like to print them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is like I said, version 2. I'm gonna end up printing another one of these, and once that one looks good, I'll start working on the ovipositor. It'd be cool to get a couple of these, the non-ovipositor versions out first, so I can kind of see how the mold making is gonna go, and then tackle the mold making that's going to be for the ovipositor, because I'm a glutton for punishment.
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk about the ovipositor version of that here in a few minutes, because that process is going to be interesting. So what's your next step going to be?
So next step for this one, now that I have it printed, I can see what it looks like. I'm going to go in, I'm going to fix those issues in there. I'll probably polish this one up just for practice, because I need more sanding practice. as I think everybody in the world does. And then this will end up being a display piece I'll just have on my desk. I'll print off another one. It'll probably be the same size, toss it into a mold, figure out where any of the issues are going to be there. I'm likely going to do this in, I would imagine, a Dragon Skin 10, I think is what yeah, 10 slow. And then I also 3D prints, like most people do, all of the mother molds as well. And I'm not great at Blender when it comes to like trying to make mother molds, so I usually use like a CAD program of some kind. And yeah, just sort of fits together like that, pour it in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So this one won't ever end up in silicone, but the next iteration will.
Gotcha. So what does your post-processing process look like now? So I know that this is a resin print because you and I talked earlier this week, and I saw this before it was painted or primed. So what's the next step for you in terms of post-processing on this?
Yeah, so next step for me is, you take it to a finer and finer grain of sandpaper. And then I found this out while working at the breast form place. You can make your life easier by taking time with resin prints and silicone. Resin off gases for a very, very long time. Even if you're doing post curing, I've heard people try to bake it. I usually just leave it in front of a UV light for a little while, but just let it sit and do its thing for like 10 days. And I think Shop Dad and I had a little bit of a conversation about this at some point. And yeah, just you leave for that long, and then you go in, you do your final sanding, your final hit with primer, and then you can actually see if there's any sanding that you've missed. And
which you have.
And then go over it with oh yes. 10 days later, I'm like, oh great, we're finally gonna be able to mold this today. Nope, back to the sanding booth. Yeah. And then you toss on whatever, like a lacquer, or I've fiddled with the idea of like doing a final like wax layer on top of it. I don't know how that would work. I've heard rumors of people doing it and it coming out okay. But for a master, I think I want to have a nice hard shell. So I'm thinking, I don't know, an epoxy of some kind, perhaps. Haven't decided. But for the ovipositor, we're going to be approaching these a little bit differently. And I think you and Shop Dad talked about a couple ways we could go about that I'm kind of excited to try.
Now, do you go for more of a high polish look or more of a matte finish, or where do you go?
So depends on what I'm doing. Like for the Cthulhu that we have here, which is designed by Batty, by the way. They're fantastic. We went for a little bit more of a matte finish on this one, but for the where is it? Here it is. For the Bubble Beam, it's a gloss finish, and so the gloss I find is much more difficult because the moment you get like one little speck of anything in there, you got to sand the whole thing down and do it again. And I find with the matte, it's a lot easier to get a nice even finish for everything, and it looks really, really good and smooth. This one's actually got a little bit of damage here because I didn't pack it properly. But it all depends on what we're doing. It's a 50-50 gloss or matte. I haven't done any of the half gloss, half matte that I've seen Shop Dad doing lately, or there's a couple other shops that I've seen do it, and it looks really, really good. But I haven't tackled that.
Yeah. I've been talking with a couple of folks about how to really get a good, hard, high polished surface that is durable, and we've kind of tossed around a few ideas, but that surface is kind of fragile in a lot of cases, and so I've got some ideas I'll talk to you about in another time. But now we saw your mold shells, so you're doing hybrid molds. So you're not doing necessarily specifically glove molds or
Yeah,
block of
I
molds.
call these I call them jacket molds. I don't know if
Hmm.
that's a term that other people use. That's just what I call them.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, yeah, you have a mother mold, and then you fill the cavity that you create with the mother mold, and
Yeah.
that's the way that I found works really well. I love the idea of like doing like an actual like brush on mold because you get those nice thin
Hmm.
peelable molds.
Yeah.
Um, and
But the
I'm really
time.
trying to get that. Yeah, the time involved, and I've tried to get that with this, and I can get close, but it's just not quite enough. Even like
Yeah.
here, where's our like this is kind of an example of
Uh-huh.
sort of the thickness that we go for, and that's still even then on the thick side,
Now,
and
if you're
that's
doing,
maybe
yeah, but if you're doing if you're doing a jacket or a hybrid mold like that, you can go with a really soft silicone, can't you?
yes, you can. I have mixed success with using soft silicones as a molding material. For a good story of that is what's over here.
Yeah.
These
Yeah.
guys. I made probably
Okay.
8 or 9 attempts at molding this. And the reason that I had to do that is because this is so narrow
Yeah.
here that I needed a really soft silicone I could like peel around the bulb. And
Uh-huh.
I did it in 10 first, thinking, oh yeah, no, it should be fine. I should be able to stretch it. No, had to toss it and the master away. I couldn't get them out.
Yeah.
Reprinted a master, did it again, this time in the soft stuff. And you can see like this is an example of one that came out and it destroyed the mold on the way out. Like it's great, it glows in the dark, it's really cool, the finish is not too bad on it, and then just shredded. I don't know if I can get that into light here. Yeah, yeah, so there's Dragon Skin 10, and then there's this like layer of just gross, completely adhered double aught 30 in there.
Okay.
And it may have been because I went double aught 30, not double aught 50.
Okay.
But yeah, that's probably like one of the most stressful things I've ever done is try to get one of these out without destroying the mold.
Yeah.
And we succeeded in it. We're sending one out tomorrow actually into the wild for the first time.
Well,
But
with
yeah,
that,
it was I think 9 molds.
oh wow. I mean, with a neck that small, part of your problem is also getting mold release down in there and getting a good
Yes.
coverage. So there's that, but also you've got to be able to stretch it, and with a silicone that soft, you're also going to be it's going to be prone to scratches, and it's going to be
Absolutely.
shorter lifespan mold. Yeah, there are things that
Yeah,
come along with using a softer silicone.
Yeah, and this is the first kind of like a butt plug-esque thing that I designed. So I had no real idea of like what are things that I could come and like do better. Or I have lots of ideas now what I can do better.
Yeah.
But yeah, this really was a kick in the pants, and I think I've made myself a world of hurt. But I just love the idea of it so much.
Yeah.
So,
So do you have a particular silicone that you like for molds?
yeah, actually, I think Dark Path and I use something similar, and that's the Dragon Skin 10. It's on the more expensive side, and I know a lot of people like Mold Star for their molds, and I've seen them used actually in making jacket molds, which is kind of cool. I know Gorilla Machine uses that a lot. But I just Dragon Skin is something that I've worked with for a long time, and it's a material that I know fairly well, and I can work with it and know that it's going to work for me. So whenever I can, I try to use that.
Yeah, I use when I'm doing my glove molds, I use Platsil A25.
Okay, yeah.
Which is basically Dragon Skin 10, a little bit firmer, but it's a Dragon Skin 10 fast. So it's about a 6-minute pot life. So it's a very quick silicone. But I'm also
That's
doing
awesome. Yeah,
brush.
I wait like 10 hours, I think, for
Yeah.
mine. Something like that.
Yeah, it's a 6-minute pot life and a 1-hour cure time. So, it's a brush on.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a brush on mold. So I can do a layer every 20 minutes or so. But it's
That's
still
awesome.
anywhere from 2 to 3 hours to make a mold. And, every 20 minutes I'm throwing on another layer. And yeah, it's labor
it's
intensive.
an active 3 hours. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do like the ability to, like, 9 o'clock at night, finally get everything settled in the house, go out to the workshop and just like toss it into a mold and
Yep.
walk away and go to bed for the night. I do enjoy
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But there's something to be said about the brush on molds, man. They're so nice and easy to just peel off things.
Oh yeah, they are very, very thin, and I'm using A25, so they're thin, but they're still also very firm. So they've got a lot of life in them. Now then, I want to
Maybe
come
I'll have
back.
to look into trying that.
Yeah, I want to come back to a couple of things you mentioned. Number one, the mold jackets that you're making. You said you use a CAD program for those, but you're also doing 3D modeling. So what's the software you like?
So Blender is where I do most like my free modeling. Like,
Okay.
so this guy was all made in Blender. What else? I did do some modifications on the Cthulhu in Blender, and our Tuca is really bright. And then I'll use a CAD program I've used in the past, Fusion 360, and I really, really like it. It's an incredibly powerful program. It's just out of my current price range, so I've been using my old works version of it, which is like kind of like one step above the hobbyist.
There's isn't there a version that's for small business? There's a license that there's like a small business version license that's free if you're doing like under $100,000 in sales or something like that.
But they just like
be
in the last year or so changed a whole bunch of stuff, and so I didn't want to mess around with that too much, and irk them.
Yeah, it's been about a year since I've looked, but Fusion 360 is wonderful. I love it's procedural. So, I mean, you can go back in time and make changes, and then it actually iterates that change through everything that you've done. It's incredible software. I love it.
I abused that feature for making those breast forms that we designed, like, because we made, oh God, what was it? We made 12 sizes of them, and each one was just a little bit different. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And so like you like get all the way through a design and then realize, oh, this doesn't fit in the CNC machine. It's too big. And so then but you can just go back to like the first like drawing you did, change two numbers, and just populates through. And instead of it being like a complete redo, it's 3 minutes of calculations. You walk away, get a copy, come back, and oh look, it's a perfectly good file. Now you can toss on the CNC.
Yes. Yeah.
So incredibly powerful program. Highly recommend it.
Yep. It's not good for organic shapes. I will say that. It is much better for more architectural or
yes.
Yeah.
So I have a couple prints that I did like very early on in this. I'm just gonna pull them up here.
Yeah.
And just show you like how like bad it is at organic shapes. So this is like a simple like pegging dildo that I mocked up for a friend of mine. He's like, oh, you make dildos? Can you make me a pegging one? I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? And it's awful. Like the nothing about this worked well. I had to go and like redo it a couple of times, and I ended up jumping over to Blender actually to finish it off because I was so frustrated with the trying to get curves. And then this is me making like a kind of like the idea behind it was a black dragon dildo, and the sketch looks really, really cool. And I still plan on making it, but I was so disheartened by like how I couldn't make Blender do what I wanted it to do that I just sort of stuck it off to the side. And it's
They all have their strengths, They
do.
Blender is it's free, but it's a little bit arcane. ZBrush is not free, but it's a lot easier to use, even though it can be a little bit arcane too. Nomad is really accessible if you've got an iPad. That's kind of the problem.
I have it on the tablet that I'm running you on right now, and it's been it's a very different learning process than like Blender or ZBrush. I found myself terribly confused when I first started it.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay, so we dove into the kaiju, and we haven't gotten to the ovipositor part of it yet. Where are we going next? Yeah. So I just lost my headphones, so I got to reboot those. You're not hearing either?
I'm not hearing him.
Oops. I think we may have lost you, Reed, because I'm not hearing you, and George says she's not hearing you. Might check your mic. I thought it was my headphones. No, I'm still not hearing you.
Uh-oh. What's happened?
Oh, got him.
Oh, George says
you
she
hear
can
me?
hear you now.
Wait.
Okay, cool. No?
No.
Uh-oh.
Just kidding.
Okay,
Yeah,
one moment.
Got him.
All right. George says she can hear you. Let me reset mine. Can hear you. Give us one more test.
How do we feel? Is that kind of working?
Oh,
Hello?
now I can.
Hello?
Yeah. I can hear
Hey. Wow, okay, cool. No idea what that was about. I think my headphones reset themselves. Sorry about that.
Mine do that too sometimes, and so we'll just roll with it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the ovipositor.
Yeah, ovipositor. So you guys had kind of discussed a little bit about creating like a jacket mold with a rigid insert that could be like pulled out. I think you guys had mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And then we like designing in a cutting edge in there that would be like a feature as opposed to a bug.
Okay.
Which I thought was kind of a neat idea. My kind of thought process on it was I was gonna design a similar thing, like jacket mold with a bent rod going through the silicone that would go all the way through it. That would keep the center silicone rigid, but still have enough silicone on the outside of it that would be flexible enough to peel off and do all its fun stuff. But you guys had mentioned doing a block mold using the 3D printer, and that got me thinking. And I have kind of subtly fallen in love with the idea. I don't know if my printer is big enough. That's the only problem. So I may have to outsource that. So I've played around with 3D printing and making molds and whatnot. They've always been 2-part molds, so I've never actually made a block mold. And ShopDead had a couple, make sure you give it a couple isopropyl washes and then give it a good acetone wash and then finish it by pouring in some I think you said like table epoxy or something like that, and then pouring it out and letting it cover the whole area, so you like rotocast it or something in there and you don't lose too much of your detail.
There are a couple of different processes that I have been looking into. One of them is, let's see, just a second here. Let me send George a message. You kind of create number one, you print your mold in ABS, and then you create a acetone ABS slush. You take your acetone, and then you mix in ABS into that, and you create a a mixture that is ABS and acetone. You pour that into your mold, and then you immediately pour it out, and that coats the inside. And you want it really thin, and so you just want a little bit of ABS in there, and then you let it dry, and you do that a couple of times. And basically, all you're trying to do is get rid of the mold lines.
It's would be the same thing as doing like a let's hear this. So for this guy, I did ABS, FDM printing, and I tossed it in like an acetone vapor to smooth out all the edges, and it worked out fairly well. I only had to do like a minimal amount of sanding to get this one going. But I hadn't really considered doing that on the inside of something. So I have a Mega S that might be able to handle that print size. The only problem is it's not enclosed. So that can pose an issue with that kind of volume.
The other one is, and I haven't tested. Now, I know that Kenton over at Funkit does his in ABS, and I think he does the ABS slush. I think that's how he does his. And the one that I have heard, and I haven't tested this one. This is a heard. This is a rumor. Is you can print in PLA, and then you do a similar process, but you mix in acrylic, powdered acrylic, into, I think it's either acetone or denatured alcohol. I can't remember which one it is. I think it's acetone. And you do the same process. And the dissolved acrylic deposits on the PLA, but the acetone evaporates off. So again, those are things I want to test. Would that have the same
smoothing? Yeah.
Well, again, all we're trying to do is get rid of the layer lines. So I'm not sure. These are things I want to test.
Yeah, it's because in ABS on ABS, you're filling as well as smoothing, right, at the same time. But with the PLA one, all you're doing is filling. So would you have to do a couple layers, maybe?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. I think that would be a fun thing to test out and put onto Shop Dad's Wiki.
Right?
Yeah. That should be something we should take.
I just need some time to test. And and the powdered resin, we're only looking at like a 1% mix. So it's a very, very thin mix.
Okay. Interesting. I will have to make a note of that. Didn't bring a notebook with me. But that's something to try out for sure.
And if I remember right, one of the things we were talking about as far as the hole for your ovipositor, I think we were talking about making a kind of a key in your mold. So there's the larger mold, and you kind of put the rod. Oops, find the camera. Put the rod all the way through, and you kind of put it all the way through so that it's actually going into the mold. So that there's a keyhole that actually supports the rod.
And that would be what keeps it actually, fully, fully engaged in the mold. So there's no rock back and forth, right? Yeah. Right. So when you pull the whole thing out, it just comes out straight.
Yeah.
Alternatively, I mean, you could always glue it in there at that point, but I mean, why would you do that?
And then,
I have a couple ideas for it, but
okay.
Yeah, I haven't decided on which one.
Yeah, that one's going to be a tricky one. So, I'm curious. I want to see it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll definitely keep you in the loop as I go through and make probably 9 molds again.
Yeah. I see comments in the chat. We're gonna have to come back to because I'm like totally in the nerd zone right now. So there was another design you had.
Ooh, yeah, that one kind of came out of nowhere with me. I didn't know what was happening until it just sort of showed up. And that's our carnivorous plant, which is still like a very raw 3D printed. I just tossed some paint on it so we can actually see it. Because all I have is transparent resin. Come on, focus. Kind of, sort of. Yeah, so that's this one here. I'm very proud of this one. It's kind of a cool idea that I've been like the overall shape of it is an idea that I played around with a while. The plant theme just sort of fell into place. And so that's with it does a couple things. So, it's a knotted design. It's you can penetrate with it or you can penetrate it. And so it has this great big groove here that you can actually, like, you could say I can like slip my whole finger into.
Yeah.
Like disappears completely. After printing this, there's a couple things I think I'm going to go in and change. I'd like to make this area here just a touch thicker. I think that if I was to do it in like a near clear, like the soft near clear, I think it's a 30. Yeah, I think it would just collapse a little bit too much. So if I make it just a touch thicker in there, I think that'll fix that issue. But other than that, I love this thing. I think it's so cool. You can grind on it. You can, you can do all kinds of stuff with it. It does everything. This is the triple threat one, and then this was the one that you said was the quadruple threat, and both of them broke the rubric. And again, Shop Dad, I'm really sorry. This is a cool idea that I just sort of ran with, and I did not follow your rules.
Oh my God. You mentioned near clear, and I was like, oh geez, glutton for punishment is it's an understatement. Oh geez.
I'm not afraid to make life difficult for myself if I get something really, really cool out of it. And I think this is going to be really, really cool. Like, can you imagine like this glowing and then this just like with some beautiful like dark green modeling and light green, like maybe some red on the crests and oh my goodness.
Oh, it'd be gorgeous, but
yeah.
Oh man, I have nightmares about near clear.
I have experimented with near clear on 2 occasions, and I would say neither of them were positive, but I wouldn't say they were overwhelmingly negative. Like you got a really, really cool looking piece after a couple tries of figuring out what the near clear actually wants from you.
Yeah. Just don't get in a rush. Don't get in a rush.
So much of what like the processes that we use in this industry is just slow down.
Yeah.
Which is really hard for me because I get excited. Like, I mean, a good example is, and this isn't painted, so I'm really sorry about that. This is an early version of the carnivorous plant. And I printed it way too fast on my printer. It wasn't ready to go. I didn't have the proper supports on. And it's a mangled mess. It's like leaning off to one side. And it's just, yeah, like I've been 3D printing for the better part of, 7 or 8 years now, and I still be like, let's just go do it. It'll work out fine. And no, slow down, Reed. Yeah, I get way too excited about some things.
Yeah. Oh, jeez. Well, I want to remind everybody, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. George will be wrangling those, and we will come back around to them here in a few minutes. Now, I want to open it up to you, Reed. You had a whole bunch of things laying out earlier. Were there things that you wanted to make sure that we got into and talked about?
I mean, you said that people might want to see some of the flops that we've done, and we kind of talked a little bit about the bulb plug, which was a whole rigmarole on its own. One of the things that we've been trying to do recently, and a lot of people do this really successfully, and I have struggled significantly with it, is to create suction cups. And so I've been attempting it with our largest mold, which is probably not the smartest thing to do, to create a suction cup. And it sucks. It works great, except that I find that I'm getting all these like ridges in here, and like there's some bubbling that happens. And so the reason that that's happening, as I found out, is my cup is too shallow. So it'll still stick to things, and it sticks like really, really well. Well, it's gonna lift up my whole table. But because I have to like hit the cup and get that 1/8 of an inch up, that brings it too close to the edge and actually touches the supports that are holding the cup in place. And so that was a lesson learned. Just again, take your time, look at what you designed, and see if there's going to be any pitfalls in the future. What else do I have? I break masters all the time.
Oh wow.
Oh yeah. And
that's got to be painful.
Again, it's very painful. So I worked on this is we're calling it the Space XXX right now. It's a rocket ship. It's a fun little dildo, and this is a very narrow version. I've since changed it, but this is one of the early ones that we did. And I got
Yeah.
this thing to like just beautiful polish, and I tossed it in, and I tossed it in the mold, and couldn't get it out. I don't remember what I ran it in, but I think it was EcoFlex, probably 50, and it was just it had grabbed on, and I kept trying to get it out and get it out, get it out. Finally, the base snapped off, and I printed this one hollow, which meant that on the inside there's still some wet resin, so I couldn't even save the I've since gone and redesigned the whole thing, so we get something like this. It's much more bulky. It's not going to be quite as wiggly. I built in the base plate that the housing will fit around, so that it just locks into this little ridge here. And this one's printed completely solid.
Okay.
So it uses a lot more resin, but it's not going to break on me. And if it does break, it's not going to ruin the mold.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of trial and error goes into these. And that's just because, again, I get really, really excited about designs. I just want to see them go, and I need to remind myself to slow down.
Yeah.
So but we've got all kinds of fun stuff coming up. We've recently been working on these, like, the most generic thing that a fantasy maker can make is a tentacle cock ring.
Yeah.
I haven't done anything tentacle related at all, and I realized that probably 3 months ago. I'm like, I need to do something tentacle. I love tentacles; they're a lot of fun. And eventually we'll have a tentacle dildo of some kind, but I want to find something that's a little unique. I don't want to tread on anybody's toes. So we've got this kind of thing here. This mold I actually ended up making up out of, and it's not around me right now, Dragonskin 20, so it's very hard.
Oh wow.
Yeah. But it worked great because when you're demolding, there's such a difference in the durometer that it just releases immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it doesn't even try to stay, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then this is another failure that we can talk about if you want. Again, playing around with 3D printing molds. So this is a 2-part. Where are my lights here? No, you can't really see into there. Boo, there it's. So it's a 3D printed mold that this kind of sits in like that. And this was, I didn't wait long enough, again, like that 10 days thing that I was talking about.
Yeah.
This was about 6 hours. And so it didn't really cure properly. There was these great big sort of flanges that would happen. And we actually injected this one. So you'd paint in all of the individual suckers there, and then you'd inject into it, and it would be under a ton of clamping force, and you'd still get like little bubbles showing up. And that's why I recommend doing glove molds, jacket molds for this kind of stuff. It's just the moment you introduce a second side to a mold, you're in for a lot more challenges. You're gonna have flashing of some kind that you're gonna have to try and deal with, and unless you have a solution like ready-made for that, like a punch or a jig that lets you cut perfectly around what you need to do, you're going to always end up with a ragged edge of some kind, and that's not really something that you want to be sending out to customers.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've got like I said, I've got like tons of fun little things, and they haven't made it online yet because I get more excited to be in the shop than to be taking pictures of things and putting them online, which is kind of to my own detriment, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Oh, geez.
Oh, we've also got, this is a really cool one that I like. This is our mace mold. So it's a topper for a wand.
Oh, wow.
And it ends up looking like this, kind of.
I love it.
But this requires, it looked so good. Like, I pulled a ton of them. The only issue is, again, it has an insert that goes into it. And when you add that back insert into it, that's when you start to get those flange problems, and you have flashing they have to worry about. So I'm going to be redesigning the mold around it so that the insert sits in, but it's a long insert that can sit above everything. So you just pour around it to a certain level, and it's not pouring. And they don't have to worry about cleaning up anything on the back because it's going to be perfectly level. It's going to look good. and then we'll be able to get these back onto the market. But yeah, there's it when it's on the head of a wand, it looks hilarious. Which is what I was going for.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also have a design for like a double-headed bearded axe as well.
Oh God.
Which I thought would be fun.
Yeah.
I was in a bit of a Dungeons and Dragons phase. I'm like, ooh, you know, it would be really cool. So.
Sounds like a hold my beer moment.
Yeah. Oh God, that honestly, like, so my family and friends all know what I do, and they're like, "Hey, Reed, you know, it'd be hilarious." And that's where like I have stuff all over the shop that I haven't produced just because like it was a one-time like, oh, can this happen? Will this even 3D print? Ideas that come from friends and family that are just like, hey, you know what? You need more tongues. How many can you fit on there? Yeah, so.
Jeez. So do you have any events or anything coming up? Do you go to events?
Yeah, so we went to Taboo in February, and that was a lot of fun. We got to meet a lot of people, locals, which I kind of struggled a little bit to sort of connect with. And there's I don't think there's anybody here doing what we do, but there's a lot of like local vendors and shops that are looking for local things that people like us do. So that was kind of cool to see. We met a lot of neat people who are like in, you know, the kink scene and whatnot. And we'd like to go back and do another one. But going out to events is a huge endeavor, as I'm sure you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But we're always on the lookout for local events. Probably going to stick to BC for now. You know, I have a full-time job outside of this. At this point, this is just a very expensive hobby. We'd love to get out to more events, and they're a lot of fun. You meet so many cool people, and like people with like ideas for toys, or people that's like, hey, I know somebody who might like something like this, or you should get in contact with this person, collab and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Well, good. I'm glad you get out and meet the folks. I would love for you to be able to get in touch with the other makers and collaborate. And now part of the rubric was collaborating with somebody in the industry or outside of the industry. Were you able to?
So I had a rough case of like not knowing how to reach out to people and talk to them and ask them questions at the time this was happening. Like every day I'm like, oh man, I should reach out to this person, ask them. I'm like, oh, you know, they don't want to be bothered. I'm just not going to do that. And so I ended up designing these on my own, and like I hit zeros across the board in that section of the rubric. I have since gotten over that, and I've reached out to some people to collaborate with. I can't say anything yet as to what might be coming or might not be coming, but in the future, I have a lot of ideas for like who and like the kind of branching out that I would like to do to collaborate with people. Like there's some great fantasy comic artists out there that do kind of, you know, the not safe for work stuff that are just like beautiful artwork that they do. I'd like to get involved with some of them to like help, you know, design a piece that goes along with their style of things. So if you do art, reach out to me. And let's talk, see what we can make happen.
Yeah, definitely. I think Dildo last week teamed up with a really cool artist who does NSFW kind of stuff and also does, visual art and drawing and animation and stuff like that. So it was really good to see them teaming up.
And Dilgo's piece was amazing.
Oh, yeah.
The moment I saw that first sketch, I'm like, okay, well, I'm not gonna win, but that is the coolest thing I've ever seen, and they need to build this. I was fanboying over that real hard.
Yeah. Now Dilgo has very much a vision across, his whole line. Do you have a vision, quote unquote?
According to our website, yes, we do have a vision. And initially, when we started this, it was me and my partner being like, "Hey, it'd be really cool. Let's do like some Dungeons and Dragons dildos. Let's do like one for each of the main races and all the dragons, and we'll go through the monsters handbook and make them all." And I still plan on doing some stuff like that, but it's been done before by some really really talented people, and so like it's been really sort of like what comes to mind when you're having like a nerdy thought and you're like, oh, that would be hilarious to turn into a sex toy. I mean, that's how we got Bubble Beam. Like like this one, it came from talking to a nurse. She's like, guess what I took out of somebody today?
Yeah.
I'm like, isn't there like a safe thing out there they could use? And she's like, I wish there was. I'm like, well, here you go. So I designed this for people that want that and don't want to deal with glass.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really just sort of like a hodgepodge of things that come to my mind. I think, it wasn't Toy Box. Who did you just have on that was very similar?
Let's see. So we had Dildo.
Something squishy.
Yeah.
Very eclectic style. I
yeah.
love the work that she does. She's just amazing.
Allison
Hilarious.
is so much fun, and yeah, she is amazing. Jeez. So I have a couple questions from the audience, and then I have a few more follow-up questions. Do you mind if we roll in that direction?
Yeah, let's rock.
Okay. Let's see. Pharrell says, I've heard someone using like a wood paste to cover the whole surface and then smooth it out and sand it. So I think we're back kind of on the topic of post-processing. And so I think we're talking kind of like wood paste or primers or fillers, things like that.
I can't say that I've ever used wood paste. I would want to check the compatibility with silicone first before I actually went and covered a whole piece with it. But I've done woodworking before where I've used like wood paste as like this is a very rough piece of wood that I don't feel like sanding, smooth it all out, and then just like do the basic sanding after that. I've done that before, but never for one of these. And maybe like if I were to reprint something like this in a simple shape, I don't see why testing that wouldn't, like we couldn't go ahead and try that. And again, that'll be another great thing for the wiki, right?
Yeah. I'm trying to remember because I saw it in the chat and I'm trying to remember what there was, if they were talking about
Brushing.
Was it brushing?
Yeah.
Brushing it on? Yeah. Yeah, brush on molds. Interesting. Yeah, if there was something in there, Pharrell, can you follow up on that and kind of flesh that question out for me? Because that was a while back, and I think I want to get into that a little bit more. Yeah, flesh that question out for me. Let's see. Oh, and there was a follow-up. We talked about it a little bit when we got started about how you got into this. So why don't you kind of go back and talk a little bit about how you got into and how you got started into the dongsmithing?
Specifically into dongsmithing? Yeah, I mean, it's not a crazy exciting story. Like I said, I started hand sculpting them, and that was the gelatinous prick, and I think they ended up calling it the OG. Which is that big one that I was talking about earlier for one of my old workplaces. And yeah, the 3D modeling sort of came naturally with the boss that I worked with there was really big into if you want to do like a personal project, as long as you get our stuff done, have at her, because you're learning something that we could apply to the business. And so when I started there, I had zero 3D modeling experience whatsoever. And I convinced him to, get Fusion 360, and, I downloaded Blend on one of the computers one day, and we started off, we didn't have any 3D printers in the workshop. It was all done like painting by hand. All the molds were done by hand, and beautiful molds. The guy that designed them was a really talented artist. And I convinced him, like, hey, what could be really handy in here? A 3D printer. He's like, great, Reed. Yeah, we'll get a 3D printer. And we unboxed it. I'm like, great. I have no idea how to use a 3D printer. So I like everything I learned was from there. And by the time I ended up leaving, was like we had like 5 printers, 2 resin, and a gargantuan like 18-inch by 18-inch by 22-inch printer. Yeah, it was good. It was a lot of fun. I learned a ton. And
Yeah.
that's kind of how I started out. And it was basically like mucking up shapes in Blender, realizing that they're terrible, and starting over again.
Right. Now, the jeweler I worked for was very much the same way. He was like, yes, we've got projects to work on, but if you find yourself with some free time, as long as you're doing something, you're learning. And, that was wonderful. It was a way for me to, work on my skills, but also, do my own projects. And so it was a wonderful place for me to learn. And those kinds of places are so few and far between. They're wonderful if you can find them.
Yeah, I have mad respect for any workplace that's like that, encourages like personal growth that they can then use and bring in to the business. I think that's just so cool. And like if you see a problem, fix it mentality, as opposed to if you see a problem, walk away mentality.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you also came from, the special effects industry, and then you also, one of the companies that you worked for did work with breast forms and working with the drag and trans communities. So you kind of, it was a interesting transition, or it was a little bit of a transition out of left field, but, you had some skills coming into it, and you also had, some work, some companies that you worked for that, encouraged you to be creative.
Yeah. Like the skill sets that I developed, I had never imagined would go towards dong smithing. I had always envisioned myself, doing some kind of engineering later on, going back to school and getting that kind of stuff. And now here I am, I have a current job, which I really love, and I'm not going to go away from anytime soon. But like at home, I'm like, yeah, here we go. Let's design a dildo. And this one's, going to look like a plant. And this one over here, I'm designing specifically to make a ton of noise when it's in use. That kind of stuff, right? Like, and
I was
like all of the skills involved in that came from, the special effects industry, and having, a lot of people that are just like, oh, really? Yeah, sure. Go have fun.
I was supposed to be an architect when I grew up.
Ah, yes. Yeah. Hey, that was on my list. So before I went to makeup school, I had no idea what I was going to do coming out of high school. And so like I had like 6 things that I wanted to do. Architect was one of them. Engineer was another. I was going to go into climate sciences. And so I literally like rolled a D6. I'm like, oh, special effects. Let's go do that. And that's sort of like trajectory from there, right? Like, I still have the D6 too.
Good. Deb Sativa was saying that Zippo lighter fluid works best for me working on clay sculpts. Okay.
Oh yeah, I've definitely seen people use like naphtha. I actually use that. I hand sculpted a breast form at one point, and I used naphtha and camping fuel. Again, that was with the monster clay as well that we use that with, and that it works like a dream. It's a little bit cheaper than like Mirror State or anything like that, but it works great. Lighter fluid, naphtha, all that good stuff. Any like flammable solvent will do something to it.
Yeah.
Just make sure you're well ventilated and have like safety gear on. Don't smoke.
Oh God, we had again with that jeweler, we had chemicals we had xylene, and we had all kinds of things in there. Things that today I don't know if you could ever even find them, but he had me running off to chemical companies where there was some kind of cyanide. There was a cyanide chemical that we used to use.
Interesting.
Yeah, there was something we used to use for cleaning gold, and it was a cyanide compound. And I was like 19, 20 years old, and I'd walk into a Brainerd Chemical and I'd be like, I need cyanide, potassium cyanide, I think it was. I need potassium cyanide. And like, I need like 4 ounces of it. And they're like, what do you need that for? And I'm like, oh, cleaning gold. And they're like, oh, okay, here you go. I'm like, Arr.
Yeah. Oh, he knows what you're talking about. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think my first answer if a 19-year-old came and asked me, I'd be like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
I think you're mistaken.
How do you know whom you can talk to about that kind of job? I guess they're asking about, the job that is going to teach you to be creative and to build those skills. George says that we should both answer this question. So I'll let you go first because you're the guest.
Okay.
And I'm going to put you on the spot.
Oh boy. Okay. I have no good advice for that. I lucked out with the job posting that I saw was up for like, a day and a half. And it was specifically for like people who are looking for special effects and, okay with getting dirty and that kind of stuff. And I think if you want to find somebody who's going to be like fun enough and knowledgeable enough to like let you go and like try new things and make mistakes, you're going to be looking for a job who's like, likes getting dirty or is okay with getting sticky hands, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's luck of the draw. It really is.
I would agree with you to a large extent. I think that it is the kind of people who are artisans. The jeweler that I worked for, he was an independent jeweler. He had a shop and he made everything himself. So he was very much one of those people that he was hands-on and it was he did everything. So I think it's the kind of people who are artisans. That's the word that comes to mind. It's the people who are going to want you to learn are the people who are the ones who are lifelong learners themselves. And
that was the phrase that came to mind as you were saying that. Like, you want somebody who is as interested in learning new things all the time as you are.
Mm-hmm. And how do you find them? I don't know, other than to say that it's the creative people who are going to be like that. And so I think you're just going to have to be looking for those creative people. And that's going to lead you down a certain path. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see. Resin hard shell versus wax clay on designs, pros and cons. I'm not quite sure how. I'm going to have to let George rework that into a question for me. So now then, I have some very deep and meaningful questions for you.
Oh no.
Tell me about your.
All right, hit me.
Tell me about your most epic fail.
My most epic fail. I don't know who else in the industry has felt this. My least favorite color to work with in any pigment. And the reason for that is about a year after I got out of my special effects schooling, I was working in a shop, and it was the first time that anyone had been like, oh, hey, go mix me up. I think must have been like a kilo of silicone for a pour. And there's like, yeah, just go for a basic skin tone, aim for yours. And I'd never mixed a skin tone in silicone before. I'd only done it in like makeup palettes. Because like I'd been making monsters and stuff, but everything that was going to go onto a skin was always going to be like a basic tone, and then like the makeup artist was going to do the most of the work. And so I had this great big pot of silicone, and I weighed it out to 1 kilogram. And the first thing you do when you're coloring silicone specifically like for making a flesh tone, is you add in your white to get the opacity, and then you start adding in any other colors that you want to add in, like tans and God forbid reds. And I started with red, and I didn't like do just like a little touch of red, like you're like next to nothing. They mix it up. I was like, there's a spoonful of red, sure. Look, put in there, start mixing it. Goes vibrant pink. I'm talking like a Barbie car pink. And I was sitting here with $600 worth of silicone that I've just turned into a vibrant pink. And one of the guys notices like I'm subtly panicking off in the corner. And he's like, what is going on? Oh my goodness. Here, takes it, shoves it under the table, takes up a new thing, shows me how to mix silicone properly for skin pigmenting. And then later that day, he's like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to pretend that this silicone was always meant for mold making, and you're going to make a mold with me right now. And he saved my ass. The only reason I still worked there for any length of time was because he tucked it under the table for me. And yeah, $600 worth of silicone. I turned Barbie car paint.
Oh, man.
Like right up in like this kind of, that is my, my biggest mess up that I can attest to. Yeah.
Yeah. Red, smooth on red is one of those colors that you just kind of have to put it in the same room as the silicone, and that's it.
Yeah, just have them line of sight with each other, and then you're good. Yeah. So like one of the first dildos that I ever sold was a gelatinous prick, one of the original hand sculpted ones. This one's digitally sculpted now. And they ordered red and green as the two colors. And like, they're opposites. So if you get any mixing in, they're going to kind of go muddy and brown. So you have to be very careful with that. But like, I mixed up the green, no problem. Beautiful, like emerald forest green. I loved it. It was one of the best greens I've ever made. And then this like pot of clear silicone sat there for like an hour as I found anything else to do but color this thing red. Just the trauma from it, yeah. But I got a red. I actually had my partner come and be like, "Is this a good red?" And they're like, "Yeah, no, that's a fine red. You can put that in there." But red is the bane of my existence and will always be. So if anybody's ordering from me and you really want to make me work for it, order something red.
Jeez. Okay. Let's see. How does post-pull usually work for you when you get ready for shipment? High temperatures sometimes mess with silicone and pigment. Do you boil or bake to sterilize or to remove mold release?
Yeah.
So how do you handle things after they're taken out of the mold?
Yeah, after they get taken out of a mold, we do an isopropyl bath. And so you get them a really good scrub, get any remaining the release agent off there, and then we'll take it and we'll put it through like just a regular soap and water wash cycle where you just get it all looking pretty, and then we'll toss it into a little boiler for a bit to get some heat on it. And I think you bake yours for a little bit in a crock pot. Is that what I heard?
I will drop it into a crock pot. It runs about 140 degrees Fahrenheit. You're in Canada, so I have to make sure I use Freedom units. We use Freedom units down here.
Absolutely, yeah.
So 140 Fahrenheit. It's hot enough to kill anything, but not hot enough to affect either the firmness or the pigments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've definitely overcooked something before, and I've had the silicone go really, really hard on me. Yeah. I've also, this is a fun one. An example of things that have gone wrong with the same product. This is the highlights of Reed fucking around and finding out. So I've got this one here, which is supposed to be a Drometer of 20, and it's just ridiculously hard. I don't know what happened.
Is that an A20? Or
no, it was supposed to be super soft.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so I don't know what happened. I don't know. I did use accelerator with it, but that should not have done this.
No.
Yeah, so it's very, very hard. And then This was me finding out how long I could have silicone in the shop and it still work. And this is supposed to be what is this, A10? I think it's A10, and it's just this ooey gooey, like not sticky at all, but it's just like the floppiest thing that I've ever made. It feels kind of like maybe like a 20 or a 10 almost. Like it's like remarkably stretchy. Like I'm not putting any pressure on this really at all.
Interesting.
So yeah, and sometimes weird things like that happen. Like even when I was making breast forms, you'd have like
Ow!
even
George in the background cackling.
Yeah. Yeah, making breast forms, you'd like run a set of 12 or 18 breast forms, and you pull them out the next morning, and they're just rock hard. They came from the same bucket as like the thighs or whatever we were making. Like we also made butt pads that were all nice and soft and perfectly good sent out to people. And like it was literally the same batch. They were like 20 feet apart in the shop, and sometimes things would just get weird. Anyway, I've kept these just because they're a fun sort of dichotomy to look at and play with. But yeah, sorry, I don't know what the question was anymore. I just kept rambling there.
We were talking about after they're pulled and how you clean them, and yeah, and then we'll stick them into so we do the double wash. We'll boil them, and then we will stick them into a plastic bag, and then we package them up. For the most part, everything we do is online, so it's a basic cardboard box, and actually I have this is what you'll get, and it'll say probably my name on it, going to you, and there's very nondescript. Yep. And it just comes in a nice bag. We'll toss in a little note of thanks and receipts and all that kind of fun stuff. So it's all pretty standard. We make sure that everything goes out clean. It goes to like two stages of taking a look and making sure that it's actually the right color and there's no rips and tears and all that fun stuff. And then we also in our instructions be like, before you use, inspect it for anything you see or anything you could find, and then make sure you wash it as well. Just right, just to make sure. I do. I will, once it comes out of the mold, I'll drop it in a crock pot for a little while. It's 140 degrees, so it's not going to affect it anyway. And then when it comes out, I'll wash it with isopropyl alcohol, and then George is laughing at something. And then I'll drop it into a bag, and then all my bags get heat sealed. So, before it gets, so all my bags are heat sealed, and then all my bags are clear. So, when somebody gets it, they can see both sides of it. They can see everything before they even open it. And, it's as transparent as I can possibly be.
No, I love that. I've thought about doing heat sealing for my bags. But I was always like trying to figure out bags that are like long and narrow has been like the bane of my existence. Packaging is the bane of my existence. Right up there with red.
I'll send you some links.
I appreciate it. So trying to find stuff that fits like the dimensions of a lot of our products has been a challenge. So we have these nice clear plastic bags that put them in. They have a little nice tie at the top. And,
So what's playing in your studio? What do you listen to while you're working?
Ooh, that's a good question. Right now, there's a song called Starship Velociraptor, and I don't know who it's by, but go look it up. It has an amazing music video, and it's just the most 80s pop, electronic thing that I've ever listened to, and I love it. And that sort of sent me down a recent rabbit hole of synthwave and all that fun stuff. But normally it'll be it's pretty eclectic. Like we got funk, a little bit of swing, lots of rock, jazz, not a lot of country. No, it's pretty hard for those to make my IQ, but a little bit of everything. Musical theater. There's always the musical theater going on, something to sing to.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's about everything I've got. Is there anything you want to make sure everybody knows about? Any upcoming drops or events or anything that the world needs to know about?
Oof, I don't have any dates for a drop yet, but it's something that I want to do at some point. Because up till now, we've only done like custom stuff. So people will order and then we will make it to order. We don't really have a batches of things that we do.
Okay.
That's sort of something that I want to try and see what happens. I have no experience with that. And it also involves me sitting down and taking a whole bunch of pictures of things, which I've already established I'm not great at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
But yeah, no, we will have a drop coming up at some point here in the near future. I have a bunch of stuff in boxes ready to go for that. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, George has been dropping links into the chat as we have been going along, but there is a link in the video description to your Twitter, so folks can follow along there.
Awesome.
So, take a moment and say goodnight to everybody, and then hang out, and you and I will follow up in just a few minutes.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Good night, everybody. It was a pleasure talking with you. And we will see you on Twitter or TikTok or I don't know, somewhere online. We exist online now.
Everybody's online. Thanks, Reed. I will catch up with you in just a moment.
Thanks a bunch.
All right, everybody. That was Reed with NerdOn Novelties. And that was so much fun. It's almost like running into a brother from another mother. We nerded out so hard. Next week, we have Arkham Harbor, and that one should be fun as well. And we will see you next Sunday, 7 o'clock Central Time, -5 UTC. Do the math for whatever time zone you might be in. And yeah, we'll see you next week. Bye.